imperative that as we move forward and we help ourselves and do meditation, go do yoga, and get clarity on where we are, that we also think about who we are and how we are connective energy, that there's no one person that is solely their own in this world. We need the energy of other people. We need to be captivated by their stories and, how they overcame. None of us have gotten anywhere by ourselves. And we oftentimes looked at, magazines, that's what magazines are for, right? That's what docu-series are for. Looking at someone's journey and you're like, I can identify with that. Or, wow, if they can do it, I can do it. And so we are more alike than different. We're more connected than ever. And that if we take the time to breathe, we take the time to be aware and to notice things outside of ourselves and not get so attached to, I'm going through something or I need.
Welcome to the Wholesome Healing Collective.
Join us on our podcast for a journey into the hearts of healers from all walks of life, diving deep as we explore meaningful conversations that have the power to inspire, empower, and share life-changing wisdom.
Through this community, we hope to create a welcoming environment where our listeners leave feeling nurtured and uplifted. We're so delighted you are here. My name is Alyssa.
And I'm Renee. Grab a drink, get cozy, and let's dive in. Welcome, everyone, back to another episode of the Wholesome Healing Collective podcast. We have a wonderful guest here with us today, Cha Jones. She is a multifaceted professional dedicated to empowering individuals and fostering cross-cultural understanding. With a Bachelor's of Science from Aquinas College and a master's degree from the School of International Education, Cha's expertise spans speaking, writing, and facilitation. She founded Expat Women of Color, a global community empowering women to thrive in diverse environments. She serves as the CEO of Global Bound Counseling, offering intercultural communication and diversity training services. Cha's dynamic speaking engagements, insightful writings, and commitment to empowering others have established her as a sought-after thought leader in the field. We are so honored to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. I'm honored to be here.
And we'd love to kick off the conversation with our signature question, which is, what is your absolute most favorite self-care practice?
I always just think it's mindfulness, being mindful of how I feel, what I'm thinking, where I'm at, who I'm around, and just being aware. I think oftentimes we get so caught up in everything that's happening that we lose track of our present moment, which is the most important moment. We can't change what happened yesterday. We can't change what happens tomorrow, but we can be present to change and affect what's happening today. So mindfulness is, I think.
One of my favorite quotes is, "A powerful presence comes from being powerfully present." And I feel
I like that.
Yeah, it's so true, just like what you said. There's no past, there's no future. We're just right here.
Yes. Now is important.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the bio, and your work is so deep and vast, and it's a little bit different from what we typically talk about on our show. And so we're just so excited to dive into conversations today about diversity, inclusion, and intercultural communication. So what got you started in that work?
Oh, that's a long, long story, but I'll briefly shorten it. I literally, so I do a lot of work not only in intercultural communications and diversity, but also in manifestation and mindfulness. Um, but I had got downsized like in 2000 and I guess 7, and I was like, what am I going to do next? So I took up a life coaching certification, which led me to another certification for emotional intelligence. And I've always been a great manifester, but really wasn't cognizant of what was going on and how it was actually happening. And so I literally sat on my couch and was like, I want to see the world. And I took a nap and I woke up. And when I woke up, it was it was the middle of the day. So it was probably about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I went to check my email and I literally had an email saying, hey, we're a recruiter. We saw your resume on a job board. Would you like to come work in Korea? And I was like, what is this? And I literally had um, I never lived abroad. I never had traveled abroad. I had traveled within I had by that time been in like 45 of the 50 states in Hawaii and Puerto Rico, right? And so that's as far as it went. So I guess my furthest place of going was at that time was Hawaii. And so I kind of just was like, I read everything, I looked at it, I was intrigued, but I deleted it because I was like, who does this? And I totally forgot that before I went to sleep, I had literally "Can I see the world?" Um, and that's just how things would happen. And so after I deleted it, I was like, okay, that was interesting, but let's go on with life. And literally my girlfriend called the next day and said, okay, sit down. I have a great opportunity for us. I just applied to go teach in Japan. I was like, Japan? And she was like, yeah, and I think you should go with me. And I was like, I don't teach, I'm in corporate, isn't that what I do? And so I was like, okay, just send me the information. I applied. And long and short of that is I got accepted into the program and they said, well, we don't have any more jobs in Japan. We have jobs in Korea. And I was like, okay, that's synchronicity. I can't like deny that I just heard this. So I was like, okay. And I just was like, at this point, there's obviously something that's moving me that's greater than me to go moving to Korea. So started putting my paperwork. 3 months later, I was in Korea. And I didn't have any intercultural training. They like literally quarantined me for like 2 or 3 days and then I went to work. Um, but my second contract, I worked at a university. They asked me to do an intercultural training. I didn't know what that was because I hadn't experienced one. So I was like, Google is my friend, and I basically uh, Googled what is intercultural training, created a program, taught the program to, there was like a group of 40 students that were going to Indonesia, South Africa, China, and a couple more countries. And so I taught them. And then I signed my third contract because I had been there for 3.5 years and went home for vacation. The day before I was going back, I was in a head on collision. And so I lived to talk about it. I have like a little scar on my right right here. So that's pretty much it. I was just bruised really bad and in a lot of pain. But I obviously couldn't get on a plane and go back. So I forfeited my fourth contract. And at that particular point, I was like, what am I gonna do? Like, what's next? Because I didn't, you don't anticipate being in a head-on collision. It happened. And I had a lot of time to think at that particular point. And so I decided to go to grad school, and I went and I studied intercultural communications and international education. And that kind of changed the trajectory of my life. I did go back to Korea a couple times because I was dating someone there, but ultimately, that started the nonprofit Expat Women of Color. It then catapulted the business that I currently have, Global Bound Consulting, and then I started doing intercultural training for global, I guess, Fortune 500 companies, and they were sending people abroad, and that's the long story. Or
Wow.
I tried to abbreviate it.
I love how the universe guided you to Korea. And at first, you didn't see it. You didn't have that presence and awareness that we talked about at the beginning. You just deleted the email.
Right.
And then the teacher opportunity brought you to Korea and you listened. I absolutely love that journey. And I love that it took you on things that you didn't even know what to expect, the intercultural communication presentations and program. That is so beautiful.
It
Um,
was different, definitely.
yeah, I love when spirit guides us to do things and we're just along for the ride and we're like, okay, show me what it is I'm supposed to do. Could you explain to our audience what intercultural communication means, or is it just as simple as it sounds?
It pretty much is as simple as it sounds. It's basically being able to communicate culturally. So all cultures communicate differently. You have high context cultures, you have low context cultures, and basically that just means how you contextualize your conversation or communication. So, for instance, Americans are considered low context cultures because we don't like, for instance, if we went to a meeting, depending, and this is geographically sensitive as well, because if you were from the West Coast or the East Coast, you're probably going to do business more like, hey, let's get to business. Let's do what we have to do and keep it moving. I don't care about your cat. I don't care about, your, not that I don't care about your children, but it's like, let's get to work because I came here to do business, chop, chop, right? And so high context cultures, they need to have a conversation or tell you a story or bring you into the fold before they move forward. So more southern states, like, if you were below the Mason-Dixie line, you're probably gonna tell stories. You want to ask somebody for some sweet tea, give them some pound cake, get acquainted or cozy, right? So that's literally how it's, you can separate high context and low context cultures. And so on the spectrum, there are countries that are more low context versus high context. So, you know, you can be very, Germany would be very low context. You need to be on time, punctual. Let's start the meeting immediately. There's no hemming and hawing and, hey, and how's your cousin? And none of that. It's just like, let's get to business, right? Whereas if you were in, like, I don't know, Mexico or a Caribbean island, everything's slow and the pace is slow, and I need to get to know you before I do business. And I'm actually excited about you. So the context of time doesn't matter. It just means that me and you are acquainted. So that's basically what it boils down to, is that we have different cultural adjustments as we communicate and interact with each other that helps us communicate better.
Wow. That makes so much sense. Giving us like insights to how we culturally behave and insights on who we're communicating with so that we can kind of meet each other in the middle. I think that's really great.
Yeah, and you know, it really helps when, like, for instance, when I first got to Korea, I just was thrown in there. But had I had some contextual understanding, I would have been like, okay, I don't understand why they do this, or oh, I get it. Like, it after I was like researching and I started putting the program together, I was like, I get it why that happened. Like, because it was like this is not making good sense.
Mm.
How
Wow.
powerful for corporations to grasp those concepts and bridge the gaps of communication. And not just on the corporate level, but on any level, because I could imagine it'd be very easy to have a clash of those cultures where you might take something personally if you're coming from a more contextualized place, and then someone's going straight to business and not, having the same hospitality of conversation, and then it can be taken personally when no one intended for offense to be made, but it's just the difference in how we're conditioned to interact with each other. That's,
Absolutely.
yeah, so valuable.
Do you
Mm.
have any tips for audience, really for anyone, on how to bring that intercultural connection and communication to life and just help anybody's journey?
Yeah, and it's funny because so in America, we have all these diversity issues and, race issues. And ultimately it boils down to communication, right? And or perceived knowings and unknowings and all these things, right? But it, like I was explaining, East Coast does things one way, West Coast does things one way, the Southern people do things one way, Northern people do some things differently, and then you have the people in the middle and in the Midwest, they do things totally different, right? So we all have our own cultural uh, biases. We have cultural understandings that we know to be true based off of geographic areas, and you find that when people, like, say somebody moves from New York to Nashville, you're going to find the same differences. It may be a little bit more subtle because you're American, right? But you may wonder, why things happen so slow around here, or why did this woman just tell me her whole life story before we started working together, and I know way too much about her, and I don't really care about that because I just want to do business. I came to work, and then when I go home it's my time and I don't want to know this, that, or other. But it happens, right? So I would say that a couple tips would be, just be aware. It's going back to being mindful. Be mindful that you're not the only person in the room, that relationships are important, and that getting to know someone and who they are adds value to the work that you're doing as well as what they're doing, because they can appreciate you and what you bring to the table, and you can appreciate what they bring to the table. And the other thing is that we're all human, and at the core of us, if you remove all the things that we've been taught culturally, we're all the same. And so it's important to acknowledge what makes you unique. um, Alyssa, I, I can just tell you're like, just really want to know things about people. I'm going to dive, I'm going to ask the right questions. And that's important, right? And so if I just came here and just was like, I don't really care for that, like, who am I? And so I think when you're trying to adjust culturally and understand people, um, it just makes this sense that you understand where their perspective is coming from, and that their culture has defined them in some ways. Now you can redefine yourself, but ultimately you're being connected because of something that there's common for both of you. And that if you tap into that, then you remove some of the biases, or you get more intrigued in who a person is and what they bring to the table. And it makes for good conversation. So I just think being mindful that, we all have differences, and that we bring unique things to the table that can enhance how we work together, what we do, where we're going. And you never know, like if you listen to somebody's story, you have more depth about who that person is versus, you know, I just read your bio, or I, I just saw you surfacey and I thought, oh, you might be a good person, but I prejudged you to be this person that you're not. So I guess I would just say be mindful and be aware that, a lot of people have so many things that are hidden behind the conversation. And normally when I do a training, I do the iceberg method, right? Where you show all the things that you can see. There's so many things underneath that you can't see. Um, and a lot of times culturally, we don't see the greatest part of a person. We only see what is presented. We can see, oh, hair texture, we can see eye color, we can see skin color, we can see all these things that are very surface. But if you dig deep and you have conversations, you can actually develop relationships and get to know a person much more deeper.
Mm, I love that. Going deeper has been such a huge difference, and just being curious in other people's lives and stories has helped me open up more. I used to be a lot quieter and I didn't really enjoy conversations because they were all very surface level. And now that we get to have these deep, juicy conversations, it's like now I finally get to talk about something. And I've really enjoyed the podcast and the way that it's opened me up to having conversations with just random people now in person, and then on podcast people I don't even know. Um, yeah. Did you have something you wanted to say, Renee?
Um, what really stuck out to me is that, like what you said about how we can enhance each other with our uniqueness. Those weren't your exact words, but um, that enhancement message, and just thinking about how much easier it is for collaboration to take place when we do go beneath the surface and really understand the uniqueness. Because on the surface level, I think there's often a misconception of uniqueness clashing. If,
Mm.
someone doesn't have the same skill set as me, or doesn't have, particularly in business, doesn't view things in the same analytical way or have the same creative mindset, that we can't work together. When in reality, once you can get past that surface level skill or identifier hat that you wear, whatever, and you understand a little more of the inner workings of what led them to that uniqueness, then it becomes a complement to your uniqueness. And it's like, okay, I'm not good at the analytical stuff. So how can we riff together so that you can give me your special magic and I can sprinkle in my special magic, and then we make something really cool, instead of acting like you got to go do your analytics over there and I got to do my creativity over there, and there's a line in between. And it's like, no, how do we meld it together and make it one, and have that be, um what's the right word? I don't know, like that perspective shift that bridges the gap in so many areas, not just professionally, but in our personal lives as well. I know there's been so many.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many times in especially the workplace, where you don't you maybe like you stay on the surface level and you're like, like this person's nice, but I don't have anything in common, so I don't know how to talk to them. So it just stays surface level because there's never that going into the iceberg. And then once you get there, it's like you can just find one thing, and then it doesn't matter if everything else is different. And it's like what you said, Alyssa, bringing in that curiosity. It's like, oh, that's so fascinating. Like, oh, your culture is way more contextual. Now I understand why you like to tell me about your cousin and about your cat and your life, and maybe I can appreciate it more because I know that that is something that isn't just isn't just like the surface level part of you, it's actually part of your heart and your family and your culture. And that means so much more than the perception of like, oh, this is just a chatty Cathy, you know?
Definitely. I totally agree.
And how amazing to be able to have people like you that can put this information into digestible words that people can obtain and connect the dots, because I think there's timidness in talking about cultural differences sometimes, and we have to talk about it to get to the iceberg, right? You know, if we just, it's the lack of, or it's the timidness around the conversation that keeps us on the surface.
Definitely. And, you know, I never even thought about the iceberg until like after I went to grad school, and I've seen the iceberg so many times. But it's like the iceberg. Literally, you only get a peek into who a person is. Um, and you can work with people for years in a corporation and don't know who they are, because they come to work, they do their job, you'll have like little surfacey conversation, and then they go their way, you go your way. And then one day something happens where you have to really be intimate with this individual, and you realize, oh, they have like 3 children, one's at MIT, one is an actor, all these different things that you didn't know anything about had you like stopped, had a conversation, and went beyond the work that you were doing and saw the individual for the person that they were. And then you got to tap into who that individual is and all the facets that come with that individual. And all this time, you knew this person, but you didn't know that this actress or actor was their child. And you're like, oh my God. And they didn't talk about it because they came to work, they did their job, they went home. But there's so many things that make up who that person is, that if you don't ever take the time to get to know that person or find out what's interesting to them, then you lose sight of that person. And same vice versa, right? So if I don't ever say, Renee, what's important to you? Like, and tell me more about that, or engage in depthly with who you are. I don't know you. I just know that you have a podcast, and I may not even know that. I may just know I see you every day and I speak and we're friendly. But if somebody asks me, what's the greatest part of Renee? Because I never engaged. I never cared enough. And oftentimes that's where the conflict comes, when we don't know. You can't even vouch for the person that you've been sitting next to for the last 20 years, every day, 8.5 hours, and you don't know who that person is. You don't know that they like have a whole side hustle that's really important and adds value to the community, to the workplace, to their family, all these different things. So I think it's extremely important that, going back, excuse me, going back to being mindful, that you are aware of who you are, but you're also aware of everybody else, and that you take time to just engage, because there's so many relationships that you are missing out on, and there's wonderful things that people are experiencing that you don't know of because there's no communication anymore. There used to be a time where you knew your neighbors. Now you live in whole apartment complexes and walk by people every day, and you don't even know their name. You don't know if they're a serial killer, thing. So I think, just having context about a person doesn't mean that they're your best friend, doesn't mean that you have to take them home and take them to Thanksgiving dinner, none of that. But just, I acknowledge you, I see you, I understand that you're present, as well as you see me, and we can acknowledge one another and move forward. Or I know some very intriguing things about you, not to use them against you, but to enhance our relationship, enhance the work that we do, enhance, you know, all the things that make us special as individuals, you know, connected, and we have more connectedness that we don't have, that we used to have in life, period.
And connectedness makes just makes life so much more juicy and better.
I like
Yeah.
to think so.
Yeah. And how often do we, going back to what you were saying about the mindfulness, how often do we miss those opportunities to connect more deeply because we're worried about or regretting something in the past, or we're worried about something in the future, or we're caught up in our to-dos and we don't take that time to ask that deeper question because in our mind, whatever's next on the to-do list is taking priority, when it's like, no, you have a minute. You have 60 seconds to have this conversation or to ask this one question. And one question every day creates so much more depth in that relationship when you're talking about sitting next to someone for 20 years or even a year, you know? So that awareness and presence is so powerful.
Absolutely. And we know that most people don't stay on a job for 20 years. But wouldn't it be just like very shocking that literally you can sit next to this person for a whole entire year and you didn't know like really great things about them. And then one day you turn on the TV and they're like, give, being given this award, and they're running down their credentials, and you're like, what? No, any of that. And how amazing would it have been if you actually engaged and got some clarity about, why they did the things they did, or why they were so quiet, or what you actually have in common, versus thinking that that person's just different when you actually shared a lot of commonality and you just weren't aware of it.
Yeah. And you never know what taking that little bit of time means to that other person. Um, I think so often, or, I'll just speak for myself. Some time ago, I had a perception of, if I have a support system, everyone has a support system. If I have a person, everyone has a person. And that's not always true. And sometimes those little bits of kindness or those little acts of engagement might be the only person that is engaging with them in their life. And it might be hugely impactful just to have someone take that 5 minutes of interest in the workplace when they go home and they're alone every night. And so I think we take for granted sometimes just how powerful us taking those interests and taking the time to connect with people can be for someone who maybe doesn't have a lot of connection in their life.
Definitely. And I think, what did you all read Death of the Salesman when you were like in high school?
No, but
No.
that sounds like a good one. I'm not
But it's a short story, and it's about a man who basically, he's a salesman, but like he just gets up, does the same thing, has the same routine every day, and like he's literally dying inside. But nobody, you know, things are changing at the corporation and everything, and it's literally this individual that's like basically dying, and nobody is connecting with him. And so, it was a long time ago that I read it. But I think it's actually a little movie too. But um, it's interesting that, you think about people who commit suicide, right? And there are a lot of things that they try to say. Maybe they leave these cues, but because people are so into their own lives, that they don't see that this person's suffering over here, or that this person needs more attention, or that they're actually struggling with depression, and they're really feeling dark, and nobody, feel like no one wants them or sees them or acknowledges them. And then next thing you know, they're gone. And then now everybody is like, oh, I wish I would have did this, or I wish I would have, spent a little bit more time with this person. And you could have, if you weren't so wrapped up in yourself. And oftentimes we are, I work with people who are, really trying to get work-life balance, but they can't because they have so many things that they feel like they should be carrying that they don't even ask for assistance, or they don't know how to allow somebody else to come in to help them. And so now you're trying to juggle too much, and then you don't feel like you have a voice to say, I need you to step in and assist me with this, and this is what it looks like. But they've been so accustomed to doing it themselves, and now they're at a place where they're about to break, but they don't know, how do I get help? But it goes back to the same thing, being mindful of, I need certain things, and I have a voice, and I can use it, and I can ask for assistance, or I can tell someone I'm dealing with, this, and it's extremely difficult, and right now I don't have the time to engage in doing this. And so it oftentimes is difficult for people to kind of navigate, but it's important that we do, because there's so many things that we're bringing to the table that we don't see. We don't see the depression. We don't see, the shame or lack of confidence or imposter syndrome, or all these different things that are under the surface until it's the breaking point. And we have to get to a place where I see you enough to say, Renee, I don't, let me pull you to the side. I don't know you very well, but I see you every day, and I see that something seems heavy. You want to talk about it? You may not want to talk about it. You may not even feel safe or anything, but you can say, dang, someone sees me and I am dealing with something. I don't necessarily want to tell you because you're still a stranger to me, or, you're a person I see in passing, but I am now aware that the things I'm dealing with aren't just mine, and that if I share them, or if someone else sees that I look displaced, they acknowledge me and acknowledge my presence, and that means something. And then maybe I can then start to shift and get comfortable and have the confidence to actually talk and take you up on that. Let's go to that tea or coffee and get to know each other. But if you look at people on the surface level, and you assume that they're strong, you assume that they have everything together, then that's how you treat them. When in actuality, you may have a lot of things in common. You may be suffering from the same thing, but you haven't named it, claimed it, talked about it. And so it just becomes a built up problem that then leads to something catastrophic, or an illness or whatever, when you could have just talked about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes just listening is so powerful, and we don't need to know how to fix it. And I just bring that up for those who maybe hold themselves back from asking those questions and acknowledging the people that they do notice those shifts in, or do notice times of struggle, and maybe they don't ask because they're afraid that they don't know how to support them. And really, just like you said, acknowledging, letting them know that they're seen, and in the event that they do want to open up, just listening. Like, you don't have to know how to fix it, but just holding space for that person can be so powerful.
Absolutely. Holding space is so wonderful, because I don't have to have the issue, or the answers to your problems. But if I listen to you, sometimes, and that's the great thing about coaching, because I don't have to come to the party with the answers. I literally just have to be there to hold space for you, so that you can hear yourself. If you talk about it and you can talk yourself through it, then you'll come up with the answers. But you just have to have a facilitator there that is listening, and maybe even asking you the right questions that you hadn't even thought about. And then now you can come up with the solution on your own, because you can see it for yourself, versus, when you're in your head and your mind is telling you all the things that are wrong and you don't have any kind of confirmation of the things that are right, then you're going to keep telling yourself the things that are wrong and you're going to keep going in this circle. Versus if you talk to someone, or someone acknowledges you as you're in passing and say, no, you okay? You want to talk about it? Or how are you doing today? Like, how are you doing today is a very profound question, because oftentimes we're not even aware that we're not doing anything, or that we are very heavy, or we are in our head so much. And just that question kind of pulls us out and say, oh, I actually I'm not doing that well, but I'm I'm acknowledging that now and I'm gonna get better. Or, I just need a moment to myself, or I need someone to talk to. But you can then go somewhere with someone acknowledging that, I see you, and that's important.
Yes.
I love all of that. But I'd love to ask you about your nonprofit, Expat Women of Color. You want to tell us more about your nonprofit?
Yeah, so it started when I lived in Korea. I had this bright idea one day that I would start a group. I went on Facebook, started a group, and it grew really, really fast. Like within a month, I had like over 500 people, and they were from all different walks of life. They were from, all different, they were living in all different countries. And then I got about 10 bloggers, and we would write stories from different perspectives based off of where they were. So there was like someone in Africa, there was someone in Europe, there was someone that was in the States, there were people who were in Asia. So we pretty much had people in like 6 different continents and a couple different countries that were writing and talking about their experience as an expat. And when I went to grad school, I then took that and was like, you know what? By that time, we had a couple thousand. Now it's like 7,000 women in a group. And people had questions. Like there were people who wanted to live abroad, didn't know how do I get started. There were people who wanted to know like how, if I'm a nurse, will I ever be able to live abroad? Well, there's traveling nurses, and there are people who need you, like in New Zealand. How do you get the energy or the strength to do something that is out your wheelhouse, that may be all the way on the other side of the world, and, you know, just do it. If nobody that you've ever seen has done it, you don't have any point of reference, you know nothing about the culture in said country. Like it was fascinating because there were so many women who were like, listen, I'm tired of doing what I do. I'm willing to change my whole career, go somewhere different. And so we tried to provide services for individuals that were like, I had a person in Korea at the time, got on the bus, and that week before uh, or I guess that weekend, it was Monday, and that weekend before the fares had changed. Well, you're not reading the Korean paper, you're not turning on the Korean television most often. So you get on the bus, you pay your fare as normal and sit down. And the bus drove her directly to the police station with all the passengers on it. And they arrested her because she didn't pay the right fare. And it was like equivalent to 5 cents. And so, she was having issues. And basically, they were going to fire her on spot, deport her, all these things. And literally that weekend, I had just met an immigration lawyer at a party. And so I had his card, contacted him, and we saved her job. We saved her from being deported, and then cleared up the issue with, the money that she owed. And so that became important. And so things like that, things like just being a point of reference for a person when they landed in a certain country, that they had other people that they could connect with. And then I also started working with colleges and universities who had study abroad programs. And at that point, minorities only made up like 5.4% of the population who were studying abroad. No one knew where the study abroad office was. No one knew that there were these opportunities where you can go, do a semester. You could do a short term, could be like a week with a study abroad program. And so just being able to provide reference to programs that you could take and help increase the number of minorities that were studying abroad was important when I originally started. Kind of helped with the work that I was doing with my dissertation, but it also was bringing light to some of the issues that minorities were having studying abroad. So that's kind of how that formed. We're not as active. We still have the Facebook group. We've done conferences, and basically been a point of reference. We no longer do the blog, but a lot of that was shifting because I was shifting and I wasn't living abroad as I guess as much. But then after COVID, I moved back abroad, lived in Mexico. So things shifted and started a chapter there in Mexico. And then now I've just recently moved back to Asia. And so we'll be ramping up some different programming and things to kind of help interculturally, for people to adjust as well as to come. We also do relocation assistance where we provide help depending on where you are. So we'll continue to do that. And so that's where we are right now.
Wow.
Love that.
What an incredible resource. Speaking from someone who's quite intimidated by international travel, how incredibly valuable that would be to have a resource to be like, I'm in trouble. I paid 5 cents less on the fare. I need your help. So that's amazing.
Definitely that. And that was really scary because nobody, we literally, when you're, especially if you don't speak that language, like you're not going to pick up a newspaper. Who picks up newspapers anywhere, right? And then
And
you're
I'm sure
not
she's
watching
like,
the
"Give me
news.
more money. I just take it. I don't want to be in trouble."
Right. And then everything got lost in translation. She didn't know what he was saying. And then just I don't know, you can have hand gestures, anything, but to go directly to the police station was, huge.
What an amazing story to be able to tell after the fact. I'm sure she went home and was like, "You never believe what happened."
Yeah, she was terrified and she was crying and she was there for like 12 hours. It's just like ridiculous. But like just so happened I literally had met this person who, because had I not met them, I would have been like, I don't know what to tell you. We're gonna bring somebody down there to translate, but I have no idea how to help you. But that helped a lot once we got the lawyer.
Amazing.
Is there anything else you'd like to share as we wrap up here?
Um, just considering that you all talk about, wholesome and healthy information and how to be mindful and all the great things that make up, people and living a better life. I think it's just, imperative that as we move forward and we help ourselves and like, do meditation, go do yoga, and get clarity on where we are, that we also think about who we are and how we are connective energy, that there's no one person that is solely their own in this world. We need the energy of other people. We need to be captivated by their stories and, how they overcame. None of us have gotten anywhere by ourselves. And we oftentimes looked at, magazines, that's what magazines are for, right? That's what docu-series are for. You looking at someone's journey and you're like, I can identify with that. Or, wow, if they can do it, I can do it. And so we are more alike than different. We're more connected than ever. And that if we take the time to breathe, we take the time to be aware and to notice things outside of ourselves and not get so attached to, I'm going through something, or I need. And you actually extend a hand, stop, talk to the person at the coffee shop, acknowledge that, I love going into like Starbucks, which is like my favorite place, right? And I go in and I love how they greet you. But just imagine like that greeting, if that's the only greeting you're getting and nobody else sees you. But what about if I acknowledge the person there? How are you doing? And I engage, and now I know that her name is Keisha or her name is Allison. And I say, Allison, how are you doing? How is she going to respond? Right? Because I've been giving and I haven't received anything. And there are a lot of people walking around with empty cups. And we may not be able to make them overflow and give them everything back that they're missing. But you can acknowledge, I see you. I see you have a cup. I see your cup is a little empty. And I'm just going to give back to you today. And I'm going to pour into you. And that takes 2.5 seconds, right? If I see you and say, Renee, hi, how are you? you? I love your glasses. What does that do? Does that kill me? It doesn't. And sometimes you may not even love the person's glasses, but this the fact that you looked at something about that person and you acknowledge them, and that's not even what they're thinking about. And they're like, oh, I totally forgot I had glasses on because I forget I have my glasses on. Oftentimes they're on my head. And so when people just acknowledge you, it changes like how you feel, what you're in your own head about all the things going on in your life. And so it stops that for a moment. So I think if anyone was to take anything away from this conversation, that, you know, I'm a lot of things. We all have these titles, right? But that's not who I am. I can be the best life coach. I can be the best consultant. I can be the best businesswoman. I can be the best daughter. All these things that make up my identity, but they do not make me who I am. I am at the core of who I am. I am a human being having a lived experience. And actually, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, and I'm showing up and things are happening. But I am more connected to the people that are around me than I even know about, because we're all energy, right? And when we step into that and understand that energy is neither created nor destroyed, but it's transferred from one individual to the next individual, and we need each other's energy. So I think take away from this, show up, be present, give more than you take, and have good conversations, and you may learn a whole lot of person.
Beautiful notes to wrap up on. I love that.
Yeah. Really like buttons up our whole conversation. I love it. And where can our listeners find you?
Yes, I have a podcast called Life's a Vacay, and I talk about blurring the lines between work and play because I don't like to work. To be at the beach, and oftentimes you can work less if you get into the right space where you're using your gifts, talents, and abilities in the right way versus hustling. You learn how to live a little of a softer life. And so I talk to individuals who are doing things that may be different, or maybe they changed their hustle side hustle into an actual lucrative business, or they just show up and they do the things that they're purposed to do, and everything flows with ease and grace. And then also, I have my website, www.childjones.com, and I just started a YouTube, which is just my name. And yeah, so I'm doing travel vlogging now. And then I have the podcast and my website. If you're interested in having a softer life, I do a lot of coaching on helping people like literally transform their life where they're hustling and they're out of flow to getting back connected to who they really are and what they really want to do. And they can be mindfully present to make work work for them.
Mm, so good.
Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna go check out all the resources, and especially your YouTube. I love watching YouTube videos. YouTube University.
Yes.
Beautiful. Well, we are so honored to have you on today. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much, Cha.
So nice
It's
to
been my pleasure.
Beautiful. So, to our listeners, thank you so much for watching or listening wherever you are. We hope you have a beautiful rest of the day, and we'll see you again next time.
Bye.